Beth Massi on allthings.net.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Hello, I'm your host, Jeffrey Palermo. You can go to www.azuredevops.show to see past episodes and show notes. And our guest today is Beth Massi, and she's the product marketing manager for the entire .NET platform, and she's also on the board of directors for the .NET Foundation. Beth, how have you been?
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for having me. I've been great.
Awesome. Well, you know, we could go straight into our topic and talk about the momentum that the .NET framework is getting, but there's probably a few of our listeners who might not be familiar with you. You and I have known each other for over a decade or so, but just a little bit of background. How did you come to Microsoft, and what's your journey been leading up to what you're doing now?
Sure. So let's see. I started with the .NET platform when it released in 2000. Actually, I was working for a company in New York City as a consultant, and I fell in love with the platform when it released. We were basically, it was sort of like the rise of the internet boom, right? The programmable web. So it was really timely to have an amazing platform that helped me do those sorts of things back then. And then I continued my career through, working in the medical field, mostly doing healthcare software and various companies around that, all with .NET as well. And then I became a Microsoft MVP in, I think it was 2005. And so I was an MVP for a couple of years. And then Microsoft asked me, if I wanted to join the company in 2007. And so I did. And I was responsible for building community around the Visual Basic language at the time. And I was a huge Visual Basic .NET developer. It's funny, I never actually used Visual Basic 6 at all. I was a Foxpro programmer before that. But I helped build like what would back then was like MSDN, and we were sort of expanding on our social platforms back then, like blogging and forums and that kind of stuff. So I spoke a lot. I did a lot of training. I did a lot of content development. And then I came into the Visual Studio team and worked in a community manager role for the .NET team for a long time as we were moving open source in 2014. So I was, on the V team that, stood up the .NET Foundation itself back then. So I've seen the kind of the open source journey, like going from a closed source product to an open source product has been like very amazing. And then in, it must be like 2015 now. I think I've been in marketing for a few years here, 3 years, I think. So I joined marketing 3 years ago, basically, just because the move to open source, really our whole engineering, this whole new muscle needed to be developed in engineering, meaning they have to talk to customers and understand how to manage, like almost social engineer, manage a community around building the product itself. And I helped a lot in the beginning. And then I saw this transformation and cultural shift on the team. Embracing, the open conversations and really like getting more involved with, people outside the company that are helping build the product. And I felt like my work was done sort of thing, or, I wanted to try something new. So I decided to go into marketing, and it's pretty funny because I think I remember saying this when I was like in my early 30s. It's like, if I ever join marketing, shoot me, right? I'm in marketing now. So, except that, it's a platform that I've, loved and used forever. And, I have passion around, .NET developers and the .NET development community and ecosystem. And it was that, I don't have an MBA. I have a computer science degree. I don't have any kind of marketing background from school. But Microsoft's a place where you can excel at anything if you put your mind to it. And so I have a great team. I work on a team that's all marketing, all the dev tools. So Visual Studio Code, all of the different tools within inside of those, that family. So, and, .NET platform and languages is sort of like my area of focus. So it's a fun team to be in. And I think developer marketing is really about being real and telling people like what really the product truth is and just letting people know like what's available to them. And .NET's free, right? So I'm not really trying to sell you anything. I'm just trying to help you use the platform and be productive. So that's kind of my whirlwind, career, I guess, and how I've landed here. And I'm actually enjoying it a lot. I really do love marketing.
Yeah, and you're a developer, so
yeah. Actually, everybody on my team has a development background, so I guess it's easier to teach a programmer or developer marketing than it is to teach a marketing person programming, right? So it's kind of the approach that I think we've taken, at least with our developer marketing folks. I work with a lot of amazing marketing people, right, that really know what they're doing when it comes to marketing. So it's a great partnership. Like I'm specifically, when you're a product marketing manager, you have to know everything about the product itself. And when your product is very technical, you have to have a technical background to be successful. So I don't work with a bunch of sleazy marketing people. We're all very creative, and we try to be very real, and we try to be our customers and feel their pain and make sure that when we're marketing something that we also feel is something that's like good, right? It's solid. Like when I talk with Scott Hunter and we talk about the roadmap or what kind of marketing activities we want to do in the next quarter or whatever, I'm like, I'm so lucky to have a fantastic product because you can't sell a piece of poo, right? I mean, this is a .NET platform itself I just need to get the word out, really. I'm not actually trying to spin anything. The platform speaks for itself, I think, and it's really come a long, long way. It's really innovative.
Yeah. Well, that's the best position, is where all you're doing is telling the truth, and the truth happens to be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen growth. Just in the last year, we have over 1 million new .NET developers coming to the platform just through Visual Studio that we can see. So, and
just
we've got
in the last year.
Just in the last year, we've had
That's
over 1 million, right? So, and .NET Core, our cross-platform open source implementation of .NET is we have over 750,000 developers on that, and literally only released I would say the first usable version was released in December 2016. So we really in 2 years, a little over 2 years, are reaching almost 1 million developers on that platform as well. And that's just really focused on web and cloud, right? And server workloads, right? So with .NET Core 3, that's where we're expanding the workloads to desktop workloads, AI, and IoT. So we're really expanding the things that you can do with .NET Core and .NET Core Runtime as being cross-platform open source. And then the fact that we open sourced the Windows frameworks as well, desktop frameworks in December, we're actually seeing great momentum and people wanting to contribute to those frameworks as well. So we're really expanding when it comes to .NET Core 3. So I'm super excited about the next rev of .NET Core and how many more developers are going to end up on the runtime. Any new development, I think at that point, when we release Core 3, any new development should be on .NET Core. .NET Framework is still here to stay for a very long time. I mean, just within Microsoft, we have huge customers relying on .NET Framework, and we're planning the next version of .NET Framework 4.8 to have a great story for desktop interop controls. Basically, you'll be able to use more modern controls in Windows Forms and in WPF. So there's and high DPI, and we'll continue to make sure that we have critical bug fixes and that stuff in the framework, because we have a lot of customers still relying on it. But I would say that going forward, .NET Core is really going to be where we're focusing a lot of our new innovations, our languages, in our in the runtime itself. So that's kind of what we're really trying to say is like the next version of .NET Core is really where we want to see file new project happen, especially as we start expanding those workloads.
Well, do you have overall numbers? You said 1 million added in the last year, but do you have totals?
I do, but I if I tell you that, then and I tell you something different next week. It changed. Like we measure basically on a rolling 28-day basis. So what we try to do is we try to see active development, like meaningful doing meaningful things in Visual Studio, our tooling. So it's all anonymous. All of that telemetry just helps us build a better product for you. So Visual Studio, and obviously turn it off. But if you turn it off, it can't really help us, help you. But a lot of people leave it on, and it's great because we can kind of see like what types of projects people build, where we need to focus our investments because more people use these set of features than these other ones, and so it allows us to really prioritize. So I want to say thank you to everybody that has that telemetry turned on. I mean, I have telemetry turned on for even Chrome, right? I make sure that every company, as long as you read the details and it's anonymous, you want to make your product's better. So we do have that capability in our tooling, and it makes just for a better product in the end.
Yeah, well, with the numbers with .NET Core was 700 something thousand, you said.
Yeah, 750,000 .NET Core developers we're estimating right now.
So people shouldn't feel bad that they're not already on .NET Core. We talked with a lot of clients to say, "Oh, we're falling behind," but really, .NET Core 3 is the version that kind of brings all the capabilities to bear. I remember doing a hackathon day with when it was still DNX, and
right.
before it renamed firmly to .NET Core, and it was just really rough. And so, with fast release cycles, the cutting edge really is bleeding edge, and there is blood involved. So I don't think anybody should be upset that they haven't already converted all of their software to .NET Core.
Well, and it's impossible to do so at the moment, right? I mean, .NET Core 3 isn't even released yet. So if you have, desktop applications, it's not going to work for you. I mean, right now I would encourage you to try the preview. The tools are not there yet. It's very manual right now. We're working on the tooling right now. So, but the framework is very close. So, WinForms and WPF on .NET Core runtime is very close. So it's actually fairly solid once you do that manual port. So we're still looking for feedback, of course, to make sure we identify all the scenarios we need to cover that are running okay. One thing you're going to want to really check is, like, because the performance improvements in the runtime, you're really going to want to check the behavior and performance of your application. Sometimes speeding things up actually makes the application break. So those are the sorts of things. Yeah.
all the thread dot sleeps run way fast.
It's kind of true, right? I mean, it's sort of like, I think Mads, Torgensen from, the language designer for C#, I think he mentioned at one point that they couldn't actually go back and fix what they would have considered a bug in the language because so many people rely on that certain, thing that the compiler is doing, right? So, and same thing with .NET Framework. Like a lot of things that we try to fix, we break other people's stuff because they were relying on this quote unquote bug, right? So it's the challenge of building software. And I think with .NET Core, like you said, it is a faster cadence. It is a faster release cycle. But we have an LTS. We have a long-term support cycle, though, as well, that you can stay on. You can snap to an LTS release, which means that you don't have to move as quick. Okay, so you can choose kind of like how fast you want to move. Like if you already have an application in production and you don't want to, you don't want to like touch it because it ain't broke, don't fix it. You stay on an LTS release, and those releases only get security critical bug fixes, right? So they're not going to add new features. So you can be safe, basically. But if you're developing, if you're coding and you're building something new, you probably want to be on the latest release. So that's just latest. And so you just you can kind of take the version of the framework that you want. And we're usually super clear about the life cycle of those things too. We have a support page on the .NET site that tells you exactly how it works. So, so if people shouldn't feel like pressured, like I got to move. You're right. And I won't give you an exact number, but we have millions, multi-millions of .NET developers still on .NET Framework. I mean, it's still a very, very relevant, choice.
So what's that exact number again?
It'll change tomorrow.
Right. Yeah, so many developers want to look at what's coming, and they're afraid that their skills are going to be behind the times. But there's the actual runtime, and then there's the core tooling, and then in order to make that useful, the library ecosystem and the ecosystem of even commercial and open source products has to kind of catch up, and then application developers can use the full ecosystem. Because even now with .NET Core 2 and the dot versions, the ecosystem hasn't even caught up yet. And some of the major commercial players, not to mention open source libraries, but the major commercial players still have deep integration with the .NET Framework project system, and it's just going to take time.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when it comes to tooling, like you said. I mean, tooling is always you have to have the framework before you can build the tools, right? So it's been interesting being, .NET platform marketing. It's actually kind of fun because I can get really nerdy and deep and talk about like the stuff that we're building under the hood. And then my colleagues that do Visual Studio marketing and that sort of thing are kind of like, oh, when's .NET Core going to be in the box? I'm like, well, it actually the 3.0 preview could load up. But there's basically two kind of cadences, right? So you have tools releases, and then you have runtime and language releases separate. They're decoupled, right? So sometimes it can be confusing on what works with what, but at the same time, we don't want to remember those days where we would take 2 years or 3 years to build Visual Studio and .NET Framework would release too at the same time. It was simpler to think about, but at the same time, we're like, innovation wasn't as fast, right? You can't do that with open source, you have to release all the time.
You need another virtual machine just to test those things out, because if you installed the preview, it would jack up the last instance of Visual Studio.
Yeah, I think we've got the side-by-side working much better than we used to, for sure. Yeah.
One of the cool bridges that a lot of people are taking advantage of, you guys have done a great job on this. Well, Beth, you haven't done anything, but you've done a good job talking about it. No, I'm just kidding.
Thanks.
is the bridge, the .NET Standard bridge. So you got huge applications written in .NET Framework, and as long as you get them up to .NET 4.6.1, that's the .NET Standard version 2 bridge, then you can start making use of all of the .NET Core libraries that are compiled for Net Standard 2.
Correct. And you're talking about the Windows compatibility pack, right? So that's sort of it's a bridge for Windows specific APIs that aren't in the standard. So you're talking about the standard, correct. You end up with, hundreds of thousands of APIs that are cross-platform. Okay. But and moving your libraries to that it benefits any .NET implementation, right? So even if you're still you're a desktop developer, say you have a WPF application, and right now .NET Core 3 doesn't exist. Well, it does, but it's not released yet. So you still have a .NET Framework front end. Taking those business libraries, those non-UI, doesn't rely on a particular app framework. Taking those and moving those to standard is kind of your first step. And you basically want to get to 4.6.1 .NET Framework first, which should be fairly easy just to retarget and recompile. .NET Frameworks have typically been very high compatibility releases, so that should be fairly simple. And then once you go from there, like you said, you can move to .NET Standard, right? So making sure that those APIs that are defined in that standard, those are cross-implementation so that you end up with cross-platform libraries. But a lot of libraries may still depend on Windows-specific APIs, and that's when the Windows compatibility pack can help you. That's a NuGet package that you can take a dependency on, and you can move to .NET Core runtime with still the dependency of Windows. That's the next step, right? So that's all you need really, because then that pack, brings back APIs like registry APIs and things that are very specific to Windows. So if you get
really
to
cool.
if you get to that point, then you're good, because now when .NET Core 3 releases, you should be able to just go ahead and retarget from .NET Framework to .NET Core. And then test everything. So Rockford Lhotka had a really great blog post that kind of details the journey of moving a desktop app to .NET Core. So I would suggest looking that up and reading that. Is a really good post.
Yeah, Rocky, man, he's a fantastically smart guy. He for those who hadn't heard of him, last name is spelled Lhotka, and the CSLA framework is
right.
20 years now?
Yeah, I think it started with VB6. Yeah, exactly.
He has versions coming all the way up to modern.NET. So,
which is great, and it's just about it's a pattern for separating your business logic from your UI, and which was so super weird back in the 90s. You're like, why would I do that? And now that's super common, right? So it's a nice set of patterns that you can follow.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a software engineering firm and Microsoft Gold partner, empowering development teams to be their best. ClearMeasure equips developers with the DevOps tools, methods, and automation necessary to focus on building their applications, rather than wrestling with builds, deployments, or environments. Click clear-measure.com to see whether a DevOps implementation is for you.
Yeah, that's even in today's quick start applications, there's still a lot of demo apps that show pretty much all of the business logic right there in maybe an MVC controller, which is part of the user interface, and it's something that everybody has to learn all over again as they come up in their career.
Well, we've worked really hard on an architecture center. So if you go to www.dot.net, there's an architecture menu. We keep expanding. There's ebooks, there's samples. It goes from web development with MVC, walking you through that, all the way to building microservices and container-based architectures as well. So we tried to kind of revive the patterns and practices kind of in spirit. Without being completely, but being pointy, but not being completely step by step. So you can kind of choose your own adventure. And there's a lot of different types of applications. Obviously, .NET can build anything. So there's even books on mobile development, on DevOps with ASP.NET Core, and Azure DevOps. So there's a lot of great ebooks. They're all free to download. So you guys can take a look over there. I'd encourage you to explore that architecture center.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, in marketing, you keep up with all the trends and everything. How's C# doing as far as language popularity?
So what I look at, because it's more a .NET platform, so C# and Java is number one and C# is number two. It's kind of like for the past, since .NET, let's think about the history of .NET, right? So since .NET was released, it was a direct competitor to Java, right? Originally, Microsoft wanted to build on top of the JVM, and they did, right? I mean, we had J++, and we had a bunch of tools all in different boxes, and we envied Java because it was like this common runtime, right? And so Microsoft's like, yeah, let's go ahead and build on the JVM as well. Well, that didn't work out so well because, Sun didn't like what we were doing. And anyways, it was a bad divorce. So the .NET was spawned because of a competitor to Java, really. And so if you look at, but Java had the advantage, I guess I would say a major advantage, of being open source, right, from the beginning. So the ecosystem for Java is sort of like what I kind of look up to in a way, because they have had a longer period of time to build a really, really broad ecosystem, right? Now, I would argue that C# and .NET is a better runtime. In just my opinion, it's super, super, super pointed, but and I think we've had a lot of innovation coming from Microsoft in that platform, but it's almost like it got stunted because it didn't have the open source ecosystem around it. So when you look at popularity, those two platforms are still super popular. We went after the same enterprises. If you look at job market, like LinkedIn data, like which we can look at fairly easily now because LinkedIn's part of Microsoft, you'll see Java is still number one. Like Java is a number one, ask for jobs. C#'s number two. So I don't really like if you can look at the most loved and most hated and that kind of stuff, like from Stack Overflow, C#'s always in there as loved. So it's sort of like I just see it like as a kind of a fallout from how the industry just kind of started. There's a ton of JavaScript as well because of the nature of the web, right, and web development. So it depends on what you look at. You look at Tyobe, you look at Stack. I like looking at the Stack Overflow survey every year because it kind of gives you what not only what I'm doing right now, but what I would like to do. What languages would I like to learn and use. And even F#'s in there a lot of times. So F#'s a very loved language as well. So when I look at .NET as a whole, you got to look at VB.NET, C#, and F#, right? And so when you look at all of those together, then it actually is, very compelling. It's very high, right? So in usage, so it's good to see.
It's tough to sort out some of this data because you have language popularity, but then where's the platform? Because anybody who writes a web application is going to have some HTML, some CSS, some JavaScript, and those are all listed as languages. So how do you sort that out?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like I guess I'm always assuming like people are going to use those things, especially as part of web development, right? And so you're right. You can't really build an ASP.NET, although you might soon when we get Blazor. But you can't really build an ASP.NET website without some JavaScript and CSS. So I don't really feel like that's a competitor to C#, and at the end of the day, it's really the world is so much bigger than it used to be. The programming world, right, than it used to be when I first came out. Like you chose between C++ and VB6 and FoxPro, right? I mean, like that was it, right? Or, there was no Java, there was no C#, right? The world is much more polyglot, right? You pick the tool best for the job, right? Even Python has its major advantages over C# right now, especially when it comes to machine learning. We're trying to correct some of those. We're trying to fill a lot of those gaps in the .NET platform, particularly around AI, ML, and big data as well. So you'll see a lot of that. And I think that's what the .NET Foundation does. It really tries to help the ecosystem grow and fill gaps and encourage people to take on some innovative things. It doesn't necessarily have to all come from Microsoft. That is one of the really tougher things I think that I've had to do in the last few years in marketing is make sure that our current customers still feel comfortable with the platform and they know Microsoft's 100% supporting it without stifling the open source innovation of other people inventing and creating the projects on their own. It's an interesting balance, right? And I think I see our customers in the last couple of years. I don't know about you, but like where they're starting to embrace more and more and more open source, and using not just .NET, but like anything else in their companies as well. And so they're not like a one vendor company anymore when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, you're right about that. At the beginning of my career in the 90s, there was the big discussion about Sun Microsystems and Java, and then the huge, tectonic shift when Sun open sourced Java. I mean, that was a big thing. But now it's less of a discussion and more of just an expectation. Right. Of course, we use open source software, and even the lawyers actually understand what the heck.
Exactly.
GPL is, and then the limited GPL and all the other open source licenses. And so now it's just normal, and it's just, hey, it's part of the toolkit. And with NuGet, commercial and open source are kind of mixed in, and the commercial ones, you just might have to plug in a key in order for it to work in production.
Right. I know. And I think that's, you're right. It's just become an expectation. I mean, we have over 60,000 just community contributions outside of Microsoft from 4,000 companies, right? So I'm seeing more and more and more contributions and contributors coming from outside Microsoft. And it's just, it's because like you said, it's just becoming more of a norm. Even large companies, you would think that what the heck are they got this for? But like Home Depot or Comcast, they have open source programs offices, right, in the companies, right, that help their developers, help their technology areas, do open source right for the company, right, and minimize risk and make sure it's sustainable, make sure it's legal, blah blah blah. And so, like you said, there's a lot of new minds at Microsoft too, especially in CELA, like you said, our lawyers get it now, and it's really only been the last 6 years that Microsoft's really started to get it, and I've been at Microsoft pretty long, like I said, since 2007. So it's been an incredible experience to kind of be here and kind of watch this giant cruise ship turn all the way to 180 and come back around and really embrace open source across the company. I'm not just .NET, it's everywhere. I think you'll see more and more and more. I think when we open sourced WPF and WinForms, people were shocked. It was on Hacker News the whole day. Okay, so this was something like, what? And even the WinUI library for UWP. And so it was it's just sort of the icing on the cake. We'll see what else happens. I'm not privy to other departments at Microsoft, but there's a lot from research that comes out. ML.NET was actually started in research, right? It was used in Bing and Office actually as a machine learning framework, and we released it. The APIs were really hard to use. So that's why we released it. And it's been a year almost, where we've got these APIs where they kind of make sense. And, so it's kind of encouraging, right? It's encouraging to see .NET. Not just .NET, but Microsoft employees having these things that were, in the bowels of Microsoft for so many years and releasing them as open source. I think that's fantastic.
So we're talking about how it's been over the last 20 years and remembering this open source movement. But for people just now getting into software and starting in their career, they're probably hearing from other people, oh, Java's all about open source, and Microsoft hates open source. So they're wondering what the heck is going on, and they're kind of confused because of this whole big change. But if they're coming, if you are just starting your professional programming career, open source is normal. Everybody does it. Nobody hates it. There, I've said it.
Yeah, I think it's to our benefit, honestly, as .NET developers, that we have new people coming to the platform. We're seeing a lot of new people coming to .NET Core. My job is to make it .NET is actually fairly complicated. How do you explain .NET, right? So my job is to make it really easy for people to just get started and come to our website and understand what they can do without having to get too much in the nitty-gritty details of which library does what and what implementation of the runtime do I need and blah 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 blah. It's really about getting people excited on what they can build and do with .NET, and showing them the language of C# actually is, it's especially with C# 8 and some of the things that were new features we've got with C# 8 coming. It's actually an incredibly innovative programming language itself, and .NET being just a general purpose platform for building anything. Kids coming into this, learning, they need to realize that once they pick up a skill like C# and build say a web application, they can build anything, right?
Oh,
you can build a mobile application. I could build anything, right? So, it's a really good skill to have. Same thing with Java, right? Java, there's a ton of things you can do with Java as well. I would say if you're coming in to the field right now, learn as much as you possibly can. Don't pick one thing. Learn multiple languages. Learn multiple platforms. Get deep in something you're really super passionate about. And if turns out you don't really like it, well, go do something else. It's not like you do used to go to college and, you'd have that career for your whole life kind of thing. It's not really like that anymore. I mean, you can look up on YouTube and you can learn how to do something fast, right? It's not
Right.
It's not like you have to choose one thing your whole life. I would say, learn as much as you can at one time. You can't learn everything at once, but pick something you're passionate about. Learn that, do that really well. And if you decide you get bored with it, you could go learn something else super easy. I mean, there's so many online courses these days. You don't have to sit in a 4-year university to go, change your career anymore. So that's what I would kind of say to people coming into programming. It's not like how we used to be like, oh, you need a computer science degree and I need an internship. And it's not really like that anymore.
Yeah, it's still really hard, but if you can figure out how to make the computer do something, you'll have work.
Yeah, and there's just, I think the whole nature of the internet has changed the way information comes to you. So you can get so much help. And developers have always been super helpful to help each other. Even back before the internet, we had BBS, we had forums, we had ways to communicate, right?
Deja News.
Deja News, news groups,
Usenet.
Usenet, right? I mean, we always try to help each other. So I think the places like Stack Overflow, I mean, that's where, and like I said, YouTube, you have video content now, you can learn so much easier these days, I think. There's a lot more to learn, right? But the way you learn is, I think, much easier and quicker. So
we spent a lot of time talking about open source, but there's some announcements around the .NET Foundation, of which you're a director.
Yeah, so I'm on the board now. I've been appointed to the board. We've gone from 3 board of directors and we're going to 7. Elections start soon. If you go to .NETfoundation.org, WAC blog, John Galloway, the executive director, has kind of outlined how to become a member, how corporate sponsorships work. So we've got some, we announced Pivotal and Progress Telerik coming on board in addition to our current sponsors. So we're going to be expanding the board and expanding our sponsorship program so that we have more income and more people to do more things, right? So it's all about where we want to take it. I'm really excited actually to see who ends up on the board, right? Who's elected, and what we're going to be able to do. I mean, we'll be able to start committees. We'll be able to start planning. Being in the marketing role, I'm kind of looking at how can I enable, say our meetup groups to do more and better, or can we do something more with events? Can we do something more with maybe a leadership summit or something like that? Can we get people around, the really, really interesting project leaders, contributors, and really smart people around .NET open source? How do we get them together more? How do we find gaps in our ecosystem and encourage new projects in a direction that we're not going right now? Things like that. I think that we're going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And so part of the announcement that I've seen is that membership is being open and solicited. So if you're not a member of the .NET Foundation, now's the time.
Right. And to be a member, it just means you contributed something to .NET open source. You wrote a doc, or, it doesn't have to be code contributions. It can be writing content or just, what kind of things have you done? Have you run a meetup? How have you contributed to the .NET ecosystem? And you apply for the membership, and our advisory council looks at your application and verifies whether or not you did these things and approves or not approves. You can, once you're a member, you can run for the board, and then you can vote for the board. So this gives you voting rights, basically. Regardless, I would encourage you, even if you don't want to run for the board, I would encourage you, if you depend on .NET for your livelihood, or you just are really passionate about .NET itself, I would encourage you to just apply for a membership. We're asking for $100 a year dues, but we'll easily waive them for any, students won't have to pay for that, or, if there's any hardship or whatever. So don't feel obligated, but just know that those dues are there to help grow the ecosystem and do the things we can't do right now with the limited income we have right now. So the idea is that we're really trying to expand the .NET Foundation into more community-owned and operated. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's great, and I hope that it expands exponentially, because it's the community of .NET it's done so much for me. And I think I spent the first 10 years of my professional programming career not really knowing that there was this community and just grasping.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what the community is there for, right? To help you, to help answer your questions. Like when I first started programming, sometimes I was just like, I don't have time to answer questions. But I need answers right now. So at first you're not really maybe equipped to answer questions, but you're consuming people's answers a lot, right? And then you realize that down at some point, you're like, I really want to give back, So a healthy community helps you help them too, right? So a healthy community will go, yeah, why don't you speak at this event? And you're like, heck no, I'm not an expert in that. No, you actually are, and encouraging you to share your knowledge and that sort of stuff. And it's not for everybody. But those are the people, I think, that help give that excitement and they become your best advocates for a platform and get other people really excited about it. And, the foundation is really that center of gravity for the ecosystem. At least that's where we kind of want it to be, and that's, I think, why we've made the changes we have to it.
Awesome. Well, hey, Beth, before we go, is there anything else that our listeners should follow up on?
Well, we got the Visual Studio 2019 launch on April 2nd, so that should be pretty fantastic. Launch.visualstudio.com. Check that out. We're organizing local events around the world, so you can also join a watch party or a local event happening, and it should be pretty fun. And I know a lot of .NET developers use Visual Studio, and there's a lot of good goodies in 2019. You download the preview right now if you haven't. It's super solid preview at this point. And .NET Core 3 preview works with Visual Studio 2019. So if you haven't yet, I would encourage you to download those two things and play with them and give us your feedback.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks so much, Beth, for visiting with me. This is great.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
And until next week, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.